Back when Centaurworld released, I knew very little about it, and my first impressions of the show weren't especially positive. I made a video criticizing the show for being loud, inconsistent, and desperate to come off as internet funny. Or at least that was the gist of my feelings on it. I even hosted a follow-up stream where I dragged the show pretty hard. I didn't understand the positive reception it seemed to be getting at the time. Just a few months later, we got season 2, and my impressions were noticeably more positive. And now, here in 2022, I can say that I was wrong about Centaurworld. Okay, so all the things that I hated about the first season of the show, the sense of humor, the scattered execution, the general over-the-top wackiness, I still dislike basically all of that. I still hate Glendale, that's for sure, that is 100%. And the switch from her annoying speaking voice to her years of voice training, I grew up in LA singing voice feels like a weird flex that gets old after the initial surprise. The show also just feels trend-chasey in other ways too, and I'll be interested to see how it holds up over time. But on subsequent watches, I've also just been in a different headspace. One reason why I don't like to make videos about every single new show or movie is that watching something specifically for the purpose of talking about it later in a video alters the way I experience that piece of media. It's not necessarily a more critical or negative mindset, but it is very different compared to my mindset when just watching something for the sake of enjoyment. Now when I watch Centaurworld, I focus on different aspects. It's not that I didn't notice these aspects before, but I wasn't necessarily giving them their due, and I would like to correct that. First up, the show is wholly original. I yell about originality all the time, and here it is. Centaurworld is its own IP. Yes, there's clearly a lot of influence from internet animation, and even memes, I guess, to a certain extent, but the show itself, like, as a whole, it's brand new. And that's so rare. It shouldn't be rare, but it is. Not only can it be difficult to get an original property greenlit in the first place, but it also takes a lot of confidence to pitch an idea like that. And I know that Netflix has historically been pretty laissez-faire with their programming, especially animated programming, but the pitch itself must have been fantastic for Centaurworld. I'm picturing like a Zoom call with like a multicam setup and props, crazy lighting, storyboards on like a giant flip pad. It must have been great because somehow it got the green light. And even if I don't like the loosey-goosey world building and hashtag so random character introductions, I can appreciate and respect the creation of something so genuinely strange. And it's original even before we consider that it's a musical show. So I actually did have a lot of positive things to say about Centaurworld's music on first watch. I liked it quite a bit, especially the songs that seem to be homaging classic musical theater, like the showstopper kind of stuff, the I Want songs. And season 2 brings some extremely dramatic tracks to the table, including the inexplicable hootenanny songs, there are multiple, and a series closer with just tons of belting and like a huge build to it. It's great. And we even get some genuine Broadway talent in the mix as well. Now, I'm not a music theory guy. I'm not going to prattle on about leitmotifs like they're impressive. I know very little about the history of musical theater. I know even less about contemporary musical theater. I just don't pay attention to it. But as a listener and as a fan of animation, the difference in quality between Centaurworld's musical numbers and the musical numbers shoved into any number of other animated shows these days is enormous. Based on my light research, anyway, the series composer was Toby Chu, a fellow who's worked on some really big movies. He was also the composer for the short film Bao, which of course is like the most famous and popular thing ever. And boy oh boy, does he have his fashion look just nailed down. These songs simply have better lyrics and better melodies than most musical numbers in contemporary animation, in my opinion. There's also a feeling of professionalism in the music here that contrasts the charming amateurishness of many of the songs we've gotten from other shows. The last thing I'd like to share about the music is just how often I listen to it casually. And before that, thanks to the team behind the show, or Netflix, or whoever, for making the decision to release the music to Spotify and other streaming platforms immediately. I'm pretty sure it was up as soon as the show went live. So I listened to this OST a lot, and as I touched on earlier, I tend to gravitate to the tracks that sound more like traditional musical theater, Fragile Things, What If I Forget Your Face, I've Been Searching for You, the Outdoor Suite, all fantastic. These are just part of my music listening rotation. But that's enough about the music. Let's talk lastly about what the show is actually trying to say. As always, interpretation of a show's messaging is subjective. And as always, the intentions of the creators aren't actually that important in the face of countless possible interpretations. That said, Centaurworld isn't terribly subtle in its intentions, which is fine, especially considering that the show seems to be aimed partially or entirely at younger viewers. In the most general sense, Centaurworld is about family and acceptance. It doesn't take a ton of insight to figure that out, really. I mean, especially in season 2, the word family just comes up over and over and over. And the acceptance angle was clear from the very start, or rather, almost at the very start, after Horse's arrival in Centaurworld. Our ensemble cast is just such a hodgepodge, and that's actually one of the things that bothered me about the show initially. While our main cast all existed within the same art style, they came across as a completely random collection of beings. And as it turns out, that's exactly what they were supposed to be. The Centaurworld characters practice what they preach. They don't judge, they mean no harm, and they're open and vulnerable with each other, with maybe the exception of Ched, I guess. This dynamic is a good fit for a kid's show, but it also doesn't limit the show's subject matter. Many members of the main ensemble have dark pasts, and plenty of the side characters introduce heavy subject matter too. Spoilers, but there's an episode here about suicide, or maybe just being emotionally dead. It's a bit ambiguous. There's another episode about privilege, and one of my personal favorite episodes is about the relationship between creators and fans. This isn't a show about positivity in an ideal vacuum where it's easy to admit your mistakes and move on from past traumas. This is positivity in the face of difficult situations. I don't think that we could call Centaurworld a realistic show, but it doesn't need to be realistic to provide emotional resonance. Now, does the show speak to me personally? Not really, but I also don't think I'm in the target demographic at all. It's easy to say that more entertainment should promote positive messaging, but it's actually not very easy to do well. In Centaurworld, it's done well, and the enthusiastic response from fans implies that it's been effective for a lot of people. To close out, I'm glad I rewatched it, and I'm glad that I stitched this video together as an update to my previous videos on the show. And apparently the book hasn't been closed on Centaurworld either. It's possible we'll get more, and I would be incredibly interested to see what they come up with. But that's all for now. Thanks for stopping by.